Now, this afternoon I'll speak about the Australian Army and the challenges of what some call the Indo-Pacific century. For all nations, a degree of geographic determinism plays a role in shaping the lens through which their national security interests are pursued. For the United Kingdom, even as you leave Europe under Brexit, there is a realisation that Europe isn't going anywhere. It will continue to loom large both in imagination and in your reality. The simple logic of geography ensures that Europe's issues and challenges will remain of vital interest to the United Kingdom. For Australia, the geographic view is markedly different. The term Indo-Pacific, it usefully encompasses the key features of our geostrategic setting. Our island continent lies at the fulcrum of the Indian and the Pacific Oceans and the Asian landmass those oceans border. The Indo-Pacific encompasses our immediate horizon across three cardinal points of the compass. I invite you to consider the view if you took a ride on a geostationary satellite above the red centre of our continent. The hemisphere you see from high above the Earth contains the most populous nation on Earth, the largest democratic nation on Earth, and the nation with the largest Muslim majority population on Earth. 8 of the 10 most populated sovereign states on the planet are Indo-Pacific nations. Over 50% of the world's population lives there. It contains 12 member states of the G20. The 3 largest economies in the world are Indo-Pacific nations. And highlighting the inherent diversity of the region, it also encompasses 10 of the world's 14 smallest economies, including some of the most climatically fragile. Linked to the volume of trade and economic activity, the busiest international sea lanes are in the region, and 9 of the world's 10 busiest seaports, as well as most of the world's megacities of today and tomorrow, are there. The region is also heavily militarised. 7 of the world's 10 largest standing militaries and 5 of the world's declared nuclear nations are in the Indo-Pacific. The region matters to Australia because it's where we live. But an appreciation of the view outlined from our imaginary satellite suggests why the Indo-Pacific is globally important. Technical innovation in the cyber, digital and space domains is driving connectivity, with the potential to bring the region closer together or possibly splinter it into 1,000 domains of perception, influence and action. Australia's most recent foreign policy white paper, released a fortnight ago, describes a tough, exciting and competitive landscape within that Indo-Pacific region. It outlines the 5 tasks ahead for us to ensure a prosperous Australian future. Quickly they are: to secure Australian interests in the region, to take up opportunities in the global economy, keep Australians safe, secure and free, strengthen the international rules that make it all work, and help our near neighbours and partners. These tasks complement the extant direction of the 2016 Defence White Paper, which outlines 3 equally weighted strategic defence interests for Australia. They are a secure, resilient Australia with secure northern approaches and proximate sea lines of communication, a secure nearer region encompassing maritime Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, and a stable Indo-Pacific region and a rules-based global order. Not too challenging when you put them all together. Of course, regional geography on a small blue planet is neither exclusive nor deterministic. Europe matters to Australia as the Indo-Pacific matters to the UK. History, culture, trade and people all flow between our nations and regions. Perhaps most importantly, so do the ideas and norms that have created the modern world, ideas now under sustained revisionist pressure. The United Kingdom and Australia face what our foreign policy white paper describes as a contested and competitive world. The Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull opened the white paper, the foreign policy white paper, with the line, "Change, unprecedented in its scale and pace, is the tenor of our times." Such lines quickly draw the attention of defence leaders and planners alike, both of whom typically have an innate preference for continuity and stability, and that ain't going to happen. Our nations and our armed forces see the same issues in this contested and competitive world. Challenges to the existing global order, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, the spread of violent extremist organisations, the mass movement of people, and the security impacts of climate change. Accompanying this widespread perception of relentless change is an equally widespread sense of detrimental impact to the national security interests of Western liberal democracies. The US Secretary of Defence, General James Mattis, articulated this in June when he stated that he saw a more volatile security environment than any I have experienced during my 4 decades of military service. In the Indo-Pacific, unilateral action in the South China Sea and the proliferation and provocation by the DPRK seriously challenge a rules-based international order, as do events in the Ukraine, the Baltic states and the Crimea. Of course, greater concern is a willingness for action over dialogue in international dispute resolution and a growing critique of the liberal democratic model that has built our modern world. If I turn then to the Australian Army in these uncertain times, on appointment as Chief of Army, I set 4 priorities to focus Army's thinking, planning and action. These were and remain to support the Australian Defence Force's conduct of joint operations. It's why our Army exists. To assist our wounded, injured and ill, to rebuild capability and respect our people's sacrifice. To modernise the force, to give our people the best opportunity to achieve their missions and come home safely. And ongoing cultural reform and renewal to ensure that our Army reflects the highest expectations of the nation we serve. My priorities can be summarised simply as people, readiness and modernisation. Unsurprisingly, these tend to be the common preoccupations of Army chiefs around the world. This year, the Australian Army is in its 18th year of continuous operational activity with commitments globally, regionally and at home. We have and continue to serve alongside the British Army in Iraq and Afghanistan and in many other missions. The performance of our people, both Tommies and diggers alike, on all these operations has been overwhelmingly impressive. We've learned a lot and sought to invest and reinvest that knowledge into building a better Army. To that end, the Australian Army is currently concluding what's been known as Plan Beersheba, a program begun in 2011. The implementation of this plan was designed to redefine what's the business as usual efforts of force generation, what Army does every day of the week, so that our Army might be able to be better and better prepared for the future. The key outcomes were fourfold. First, the standardisation of brigade structures to improve our ability to sustain operations. Second, a force generation cycle that provides a framework to prioritise resourcing and training among our combat brigades. Third, the improved integration of our regular and our reserve personnel into a total workforce model, which better allows all soldiers to contribute to operational capability. And finally, the transformation and formation of a specialist amphibious infantry battalion as a component of a developing Australian Defence Force amphibious capability. Now, in combination, these changes have allowed us to field a better trained, ready and agile force focused on brigade group operations within a divisional joint force setting. In terms of modernisation through materiel acquisition programs, 3 priority projects have constant attention. Building a land combat digital network, upgrading protected manoeuvre, and the Soldier Combat Ensemble. We're moving from an analogue army to a digital by design force, secure, resilient and connected to joint and coalition partners. This is grindingly hard work. We've seen and been through this process and the cul-de-sacs that have been laid for us over the last 15 years. And I think it'll take another 10 years to create a whole-of-force network effect. That's a quarter of a century from analogue to digital. But it is an extraordinary step forward in capability and worth the effort. Protective manoeuvre through replacement programs for reconnaissance and infantry fighting vehicles and upgrades to our armour, it's the hard punch that only the land force can deliver. And the Soldier Combat Ensemble greatly enhances the awareness, the lethality and the survivability of our people. 3 iconic projects. But are they enough? Working on our part of the task set by the Defence White Paper and inferred by the Foreign Policy White Paper, in a very complex and dynamic region, I suggest the best capability that we have remains our people and how we invest in them. And I see 3 opportunities to assist and to further that story: engagement, adaptation, and teaming with technology. I'll address each of these in turn, but first, some context. Prime Minister Turnbull wrote in our Foreign Policy White Paper, quote, "More than ever, Australia must be sovereign, not reliant. We must take responsibility for our own security and prosperity while recognising we are stronger when sharing the burden of leadership with trusted partners and friends." What matters here is context. Things that work for other nations and armies with different economic, demographic, industrial, geographic circumstances and political cultures will not necessarily work for Australia. We have a long history back home of embracing the latest idea, trend or military concept from allies, partners and corporations, sometimes uncritically, without due consideration of its utility for our unique sovereign and strategic circumstance. An audience such as this may be familiar with many of these ideas. Amongst their number are, from the 50s and 60s, the Pentropic Division, the revolution of military affairs in the 1980s, effects-based operations, network-centric warfare, and the wordy manoeuvre operations in a littoral environment. We've been flirting with Chinese and US and European concepts of anti-access and area denial, as many others have. Following on from the Prime Minister's thoughts, we need, as a part of Australia's joint force and operating within our whole-of-government national security construct, an Australian army that is fit for purpose for our unique circumstances. I speak of an army not intellectually beholden of others or to others, but rather benefiting from close collaboration and cooperation on both ideas and actions with allies and friends. Equally, an army which will offer these allies and friends the benefits of insights to our challenges, shared and experienced in the Indo-Pacific domain, that are based on our thinking, experience and circumstances. A land force respected and understood by many, strengthened by our intellectual capacity, training, regional relationships and Australia's industrial and wider economic capabilities. An army that operates as a core component of a relatively small but nevertheless technically sophisticated Australian joint force. And within an Australian whole-of-government approach, I believe what the United Kingdom's national security and national cyber security strategies have referred to as a comprehensive approach. To be that army, we need to continue to build on our efforts in engagement, adaptation and teaming with technology. To engagement. Following the White Paper's lead, Army is focused on engagement with Australia's allies, partners, friends and cohabitants of the Indo-Pacific. Our international engagement is at record levels. The Australian Army is first and foremost a people force, and we have long recognised and frequently demonstrate an ability to develop and sustain deep and enduring personal and institutional habitual relationships within our region and further afield. Through engaging internationally, we enhance capability, sustain Australia's influence, generate security partnerships, and build regional security resilience. Engagement can help shape to avoid conflict through the development of shared understanding and resolve. If conflict arises, it offers the opportunity to build upon familiar, established and habitual patterns of cooperation. Sun Tzu advises us to figure out how to do things so that you get the maximum effect and the least bloodshed. And should, sadly, the blood flow through engagement, we are stronger together. In regard to adaptation, it is a truism that victory in war goes to the side that most effectively adapts to the actual war being fought and then continues to adapt to opportunities and challenges that that war presents. Sometimes this happens before the first shot is fired. It's self-evident that we must try and position ourselves to win the first and subsequent cycles of the adaptation contest. Coming second is a lonely place. The Defence White Paper noted the capability edge that Australia has long held within our region is being progressively and consistently eroded in the face of regional economic growth and commensurate increases in spending on military acquisition and technology within the Indo-Pacific. Can our capability edge be retained through developing and maintaining an intellectual edge? In 2016, our Army reviewed and commenced renewal of our entire approach to education, individual and collective training, doctrine, development and publication. Last month in this process I released the Army Professional Military Education Strategy to direct, resource and assess the work that remains in this vital aspect of capability. I previously quoted the US historian Williamson Murray to explain why I'm very serious about this idea of seeking to drive an intellectual edge. These words still ring true. He said, "War is neither a science nor a craft, but rather an incredibly complex endeavour which challenges men and women to the core of their souls. It is, to put it bluntly, not only the most physically demanding of all the professions, but also the most demanding intellectually and morally. The cost of slovenly thinking at every level of war can translate into the deaths of innumerable men and women, most of whom deserve better from their leaders. We simply can't afford slovenly thinking. However, adaptation requires more than just smart people. It requires a permission, a supportive culture, a drive for excellence and innovation. And in the culture versus strategy wars, I am absolutely an adherent to the view that culture eats strategy for breakfast every time. I want to see an Australian Army culture evolve as one welcoming of adaptation and of an adaptive behaviour, as an institutional norm, not as a bumper sticker. And we can achieve adaptation in our systems and processes and organisations through evolution and innovation and the interplay between them. Evolution to see gradual and incremental change, innovation that takes a step change to a new horizon. A recent online article in the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's blog succinctly outlined the opportunity offered. They say, why focus on innovation? A small country trying to equip, deploy and sustain a small high-tech defence force won't derive either an operational advantage or an economic advantage from trying to do the same thing as everyone else, only cheaper. Innovation in equipment, organisation and processes is the difference between ordinary, vulnerable and irrelevant on the one hand, and effective, strong and resilient on the other. I am intuitively attracted to innovation and remain deeply aware that the continuing process of evolution has to be the norm. Together, both present the future of where we need to be. My sense is of most of our currently planned future investment could best be described as evolutionary adaptation, perhaps 10% being innovative, and we need to be pushing that innovative edge further, perhaps up to 20% or so. Need to drive it as a normal, significant component of our business, lest a small force be destined to be an irrelevant force. Finally, to teaming with technology. Armies and defence forces are forever trying to enhance the power they can harness and generate in pursuit of national interests. Plan Beersheba and an emphasis on a networked combat system are examples of this. Historically, armies have sought power through size and mobilisation planning, innovative technologies, training and education, formal alliances and coalitions of the willing, and more recently through joint, combined and interagency operations, or typically through all of the above. Despite these efforts, could the sheer scale of a future security challenge overwhelm our capacity to cope? Possibly. It's happened before. Someday, it's almost guaranteed if we hold on to the mindsets and modes of the industrial age and its war-fighting precepts. For a small force, the Australian Army and the Australian Defence Force can never forget, but also never accept, Stalin's famous aphorism, quantity has a quality all its own. Our strategic policy is based on the view that the quantity of people is not necessarily decisive. And if quality is rising across our region, we need to keep pursuing new, challenging opportunities. Today, in this regard, I refer to teaming with technology that disproportionately magnifies the scale and effect of our organisation collectively and individually, and brings together the intellectual, the doctrine, the training and education effects. We know that digital technology is transforming some aspects of warfare and the domains in which it may be conducted. Soon, perhaps sooner than we might be comfortable, the impact of things such as hypersonics, autonomous, robotic and quantum and artificial intelligence technologies will revolutionise the conduct of war. We can see the crest of a new wave of technology approaching. While distant, it's big. As my surfer friends would say, it's gnarly and it's moving very fast. But its finer details are hidden. The true nature, impact and timing of technological change is never accurately predicted, especially when it's happening around you and it's happening to you. What's always apparent in hindsight is late adopters struggle to catch up. The scale of Chinese commitment to artificial intelligence research, for example, is indicative of a nation determined not to be late to that opportunity. Australia has a well-educated population and a relatively capable and innovative science, technology, engineering and mathematics sector for a nation of our size. Indeed, we lead global research in some niche areas. Importantly, we also have close collaborative relationships with many global STEM leaders, including the UK. The Australian Army will team with this next impending technological revolution because it makes sense and we must. We are too small not to. We'll work from the foundation assumption that technology works best when enabling or partnering human endeavour. But I expect that will be challenged. Both the UK and Australia are very aware that the can-do of technological capability will and is now rapidly outpacing the moral, ethical and legal considerations of should do. This will only accelerate, driven by those states and non-state actors alike who feel unconstrained by such notions and the laws of war. ISIS and the DPRK might be today's exemplars but it's a congested field. The concerns recently expressed by scientists, ethicists and advocates regarding the rise of the killer bots are very real and worth noting. I suspect a middle way is likely to emerge. We already see humans out of the loop to manage the split-second requirements of close-in ship and vehicle short-range active protective systems. The debate and its resolution are vital to our future, but also a healthy reminder of a history, a culture, and a political civilization worth defending. Ladies and gentlemen, Australia's strategic policy envisages an increasingly challenged world. That policy seeks to avoid conflict but prepares our army as a component of the Australian Defence Force to fight our nation's wars if necessary. Our people are the core capability through which the Australian Army will meet the challenges of the Indo-Pacific century. Key to our future success will be the considerable intellectual talent that the Army possesses or can draw upon from our nation and our community of partners, friends and allies to innovatively build and harness a powerful land force combining our people and partners with the culture, strategy, concept and technology to win. I have deliberately covered a lot of ground very quickly today and would welcome any questions or comments you may have. Thank you.